Madame et Monsieur, this is 3 Count Commentaries. I am your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about this lawsuit. Kevin Kelly and the Tate brothers are suing AEW. So I couldn't find a copy of the lawsuit, the actual document. So I apologize for that. So usually on this channel, when we talk legal issues, we try to get the primary document to read from. But the news broke on the Wrestling News, which is part of the Arcadian Vanguard brand of wrestling content that is produced by Brian Last, who is the partner of Jim Cornette on his pair of podcasts. So they broke the news this morning that Stephen P. New and Benjamin Beyer, the two lawyers for Kevin Foote, who is Kevin Kelly, and the Tate brothers, are suing All Elite Wrestling and Ian Riccaboni. Now, since I could not find the actual document, we're going to go through a couple of articles. This one is the main one we're going to use, which is from pwinsider.com, written by Mike Johnson, who is one of the best at talking about legal issues. And he actually did read the document. So we're going to go through this, and I'll give you my thoughts as we go through it. My initial thoughts is, well, let's put this to a side for real quick. Let's ramble a little bit. So Stephen P. New, of course, is the attorney that is promoted all the time by Jim Cornette. What you might not know, and what most people have not discussed, is that Stephen P. New also sued Ring of Honor 3 years ago in what Kelly Klein, the young lady who claimed that she was sexually harassed by Jay Lethal. And she also argued that the independent contractor status was bogus and a misclassification. That being said, that was 3 years ago. I don't know what happened to that lawsuit. So I did a video on it, so it's in my channel somewhere. But the status of that lawsuit, completely and totally unknown. I don't know if it was probably settled before Ring of Honor was sold. I would imagine it would have had to be. But the lawsuit was filed in 2021. This is where I think Joey Mercury also sued Ring of Honor similarly. I don't know what the status of that one was either. I think they both had Stephen P. New as an attorney. So Stephen P. New kind of has a hard-on for this misclassification issue. So that would explain why that is becoming a topic of discussion here. But let's get into the article so we can talk about the topic at hand. All right. So it says PW Insider has acquired a copy of the 41-page lawsuit, which alleges the Tate Twins were defamed after they were cut from Ring of Honor contracts due to company budget cuts. But AEW and ROH owner Tony Khan claimed that they were cut due to no-showing events, which the Tate Twins deny is accurate. They allege they are owed money, including royalties and travel reimbursements, and, quote, suffered damages in unspecified amounts for the unpaid compensation, and suffered indirect damages in an amount to be determined at trial. Let's pause right here. So the Tate Twins, they were fired from Ring of Honor for missing shows, which they admitted that they missed the show because they didn't want to go to a different airport. That was the story. The story was, this airport is further away than the usual airport. You know, we would have to drive way over there. And AEW and / Ring of Honor was like, that's the airport that you have to get to go to the show? Like, I don't know how old these guys are. I know they're pretty young. But they no-showed the event. Like, did you appear at the event? No. Was your ticket paid for so that you could come to the event? Yes. And this is what they put out there on their own. So as a refresher, let's talk about this for a second. So they actually put out tweets on March the 12th. Well, they screenshotted the conversation that they had with Ring of Honor and said, hey, this is Brandon and Brent Tate. We were wondering if we were booked on Collision ROH this weekend because we haven't gotten our flight info yet. Thanks, Tate Twins. AEW responded, I'll ask. Brent Tate says, hey, we just received emails about driving to Nashville for flights, and we've never flown out of there before because it's 3 hours away. We have an airport 15 minutes away from us. And the other Tate twin says, even the old Ring of Honor never had us fly out of Nashville. In other words, they didn't want to fly out of a specific airport, so they missed the show. I said it then, I say it now. They no-showed the event. They admitted that they no-showed the event. What are they suing for? Whatever, man. It don't matter. Look, I know some people are on the side of the Tate twins. You'll feel free to make your argument in the comment section below why you think the Tate twins were right to not get on the flight that the company already paid for, and it's just a 3-hour drive. I don't know. So let's get back to the PW Insider article. It says the lawsuit specifically notes, quote, this Khan's statement is demonstrably unproven and false. In fact, plaintiff Tates were prevented from attending one event because AEW incorrectly booked them to fly out of Nashville instead of their home airport in Knoxville this week. That would be in Tennessee for anybody who's not, who's not in the know. And AEW failed to correct the travel arrangements when contacted. Defendant Khan did not correct the false statement after receiving this information. Plaintiff Tates were also not able to do a show in Canada as they were contacted too late to be able to travel to Canada in time for the show. Now, that latter part, I don't know anything about, and it's entirely possible that occurred. It's entirely possible. But that whole thing about you having to go to a different airport, I'm sorry. The company is paying for it, and you're underneath, guys. You didn't want to drive 3 hours, therefore you missed the show. It's not the company's fault. You were made aware of where your tickets were going to be. It's not like you went to the airport and was like, hey, where's our tickets? And they said, well, it's 5 hours away or something like that. And then you were like, oh my God, what the hell? I'm going to miss the show. It was, hey, are we booked this weekend? Yeah, but you got to go through this airport. Instead of saying, man, why would you do that? Or, okay, and then talking about them or talking to them when you got there and saying, hey, could you guys not do that? That's a 3-hour drive. Gas is expensive, whatever. Or maybe that's going to be the new normal and they're going to have you flying out of Nashville from that point forward. We don't know. But it's immature to take for granted that the company is paying for you as an independent wrestler. An underneath guy is paying for your flight to get from your home to where they want you to be. And you figure, I'll show up when I show up. Or what next? You gonna need limo service? Now, as far as them being defamed, well, they're being called liars. They're also calling Tony Khan a liar. So wouldn't that also be defamation? Well, somebody proved that they did not make the show, and that was the Tate twins. They may have had an excuse why they didn't miss the show, but they missed the show. So back into the article, it says, in the lawsuit, the Tate stated that they have not had one wrestling booking since departing Ring of Honor, despite their attempts to work, and that, quote, the statement that plaintiffs' Tates were no-shows, which implied that they were unreliable in their profession, subjects each of them to ridicule, embarrassment, humiliation, and a detrimental to each of their personal and professional relationships. Well, this part at least is true. By saying that the Tate twins no-show shows, it's less likely for them to get booked in other places, especially since they made such a big deal about it. But here's the thing. They made a big deal about it. They're the ones who made this stuff public. It's not like Tony Khan came out of nowhere and said, oh yeah, those Tate twins, they're no-shows. Don't book them. They're the ones who went, live and started tweeting about it and posting screenshots and everything. They're the ones who made it a big deal. So now even if the company just cuts you because, well, you're too much to deal with, they don't want to handle you, the fact that you overreacted the way that you did is probably a look at the promoters like, hey, we ain't booking these guys. Not only do they show up when they feel like it, or, we have to book them out of a certain airport because they're big stars, but also They're the kind of guys who are unprofessional and would put it all on Twitter, which is what they did. Again, they are guilty of doing this thing to themselves. I don't get it. It says, quote, they stated that Khan, quote, had absolutely no evidence to support that the plaintiff Tates intentionally did not show up for events, as opposed to having a legitimate reason for their non-appearance. Is that wasn't Tony Khan be the one to make it the argument about whether it's a legitimate reason? A legitimate reason is if somebody's sick, if somebody dies, a family member dies. There's, in school they call them, excused absences. Things happened. You did not want to get on the flight. It's not a legitimate reason to no-show the event. Well, I don't want to fly out of this airport. You're not Brock Lesnar. Get on the airplane that they told you to get on. They provided you with the ticket. So what is going on here? Moving on. In the case of Foot, ROH announcer Ian Riccaboni is also named as defendant. The lawsuit alleges that Foot was hired after Tony Khan brought up the idea of him calling AEW Collision during conversations about New Japan Pro Wrestling, where Foot was working at the time. New Japan Pro Wrestling is a partner with AEW. Foot's contract contained a termination date of June 30th, 2026, according to the lawsuit, but when he was let go by the company, AEW allegedly breached the deal by not paying Foot money owed, royalties, and reimbursement of travel expenses. The exact amounts were redacted in the lawsuit. Okay, so that sounds fair. If you're owed like royalties and stuff like that, then can't argue with that. It says Foot is alleging defamation and false light on the part of AEW and Riccaboni. In the lawsuit, it states that Foot, quote, used social media to recommend that people view the movies Sound of Freedom on July the 12th, 2023. It's supposed to be 2023. There's misspellings in here, and it says 2003. So trust me, I'm struggling through this. This led to Riccaboni allegedly stating on a Discord social media platform on August 13th about Foot, quote, also had no idea he was going to promote QAnon movies, or else I might have made a different suggestion. I suppose that his name was always in the mix, but the QAnon stuff breaks my heart a little bit. Now, the context for this is that Ian Riccaboni went on a Discord server and trash talked Kevin Kelly because he was promoting the movie Sound of Freedom, which is, for some odd reason, a QAnon movie, which is just a movie. It is just a movie about human trafficking. But WWE is being sued for human trafficking, and people know that human trafficking across the border exists, but that's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory that people are being human trafficked, and yet WWE is being sued for human trafficking, and yet everybody knows that human trafficking exists. There is a young lady who is from North Korea who was trying to escape North Korea and was trafficked into China by her. She wanted to get out of there. And that included a lot of terrible sexual situations. Let's just say that. This stuff is real. I don't understand what the conspiracy theory concept comes from. They just didn't like Tim Ballard. They ended up sinking his ship eventually because that's what they do. But the Sound of Freedom all of a sudden became a QAnon conspiracy theory movie, when in reality it's one of the most bland movies ever made. It's an incredibly bland movie. The article states, noting that the film has been, quote, associated with QAnon in social media, and that, quote, QAnon has been described as a right-wing conspiracy group that spreads misinformation and disinformation. Okay. The lawsuit notes that Foot, quote, attempted to contact defendant Riccaboni in an attempt to resolve the false statement published by defendant Riccaboni regarding plaintiff Foot's implied association with QAnon, and received no response. So these two guys who are, allegedly friends, and Riccaboni got Kevin Kelly the job on Collision. So After seeing this, Discord comment or whatever, Kevin Kelly tried to contact Ian Riccaboni and say, hey, what's going on? I thought we were cool. What are you doing? And Ian Riccaboni was like, nah, don't really want to talk to you about that. Well, the guy doesn't have to talk to you. He doesn't really have to talk to you. So, the lawsuit states that the association between the movie and QAnon is, quote, unproven and false, and that, quote, the statement that Plaintiff Foot was promoting a QAnon movie is unproven and false. The implication that Plaintiff Foot is a member of, supports, and or endorses QAnon is unproven and false. Defendant Riccaboni did not remove the post or otherwise clarify it to disassociate Plaintiff Foot with QAnon. Okay, so what? If that's his opinion that, The Sound of Freedom is a QAnon movie, so what? It's his opinion. Now, if somebody acts on that opinion, we might have a conversation, and we have to prove that Ian Riccaboni's statement is what led to him being fired, and not, Kevin Kelly's absolutely god-awful commentating. The article continues, stating that Foot has never had, and will never have an association with QAnon. The lawsuit alleges that, quote, the implied association with QAnon subjected Plaintiff Foot to ridicule, embarrassment, humiliation, and is detrimental to his personal and professional relationships. Okay, that's somewhat true. It's somewhat true. People don't want to be bothered, especially in the wrestling space. They don't want to be bothered with people who are associated with QAnon or right-wing stuff. That's fair enough. Continuing, the lawsuit states that Riccaboni published the statements on Discord, published it with, quote, knowledge of in reckless disregard for their falsity, and had, quote, absolutely no evidence to support a relationship between Plaintiff Foot and QAnon, and no evidence to support a relationship between the movies and QAnon. Okay. All right. I see that. It also stated that, quote, the statements are highly offensive to a reasonable person, as it has been reported that QAnon has been defined as a domestic terrorist and or otherwise regarding as a cult, conspiracy theorist, and antagonistic to the enforcement of laws. Okay, so the belief that QAnon is a terrorist organization or a terrorist group or ideology, I guess you could probably say. I don't think QAnon is an actual organization. And saying that this guy is basically buddying up with terrorists and conspiracy theorists, yeah, that could be damaging to his relationships and his business. I see how that could be. And then Mike Johnson decided to add a little bit of a note here. This ought to be interesting. Note from Mike. It should be noted that connection between the film and QAnon was covered quite a bit in the mainstream media when the film was released for a small theatrical run and was a big talking point around the film. Time reported, quote, billed as a story about the real-life Tim Ballard, a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security and the founder of the anti-trafficking group Operation Underground Railroad, Sound of Freedom has become mired in controversy over criticism that it features misleading depictions of child exploitation and plays into right-wing conspiracy theories associated with the QAnon movement. These associations have been perpetuated by both Ballard and his on-screen counterpart, Jim Caviezel, who has been a prominent supporter of QAnon for years. Let's pause right here. This is not a legitimate connection between the movie and QAnon. All right. Just because it's somebody's opinion that it is, this is blowing my mind because it's a movie. Ergo, it's fiction. So the idea that the movie would have a misleading depiction of child exploitation, so what? It's fiction. It's not real. It's a movie. That's like saying the Fantastic Four shows unrealistic depictions of human beings walking around on fire. It's not real. Mike's note continues. NPR also provided coverage on the potential connection. The film was being worked on back in 2015, well before QAnon began to be established in the public eye. The actual film was actually shot in 2018, but took several years to be released and was finally released in part due to crowdfunding for the marketing and distribution after the Disney company, which had acquired it, had not moved to release it. That led to the Sound of Freedom being acquired back by the filmmakers. Okay, I see. But still, it's fiction. Who cares if it's not an accurate depiction of child exploitation? It's a fake movie. This is the most ridiculous aspect of this entire discussion. It's not real. Moving on. The lawsuit notes that Foot, quote, made a complaint to AEW about Riccaboni's post, pointing out AEW's social media policy, which is redacted to the public in the lawsuit, but that has, after the complaint, quote, AEW began taking adverse actions towards Foot's announcing duties. Now, before we get there, saying negative things about team members is a violation of AEW's code of conduct. That is a fact. Remember, there is a disciplinary committee that is giving guys fines for trash talking each other online in shoot fashion, of course. There's literally a committee for this. And we have gone through this before in AEW's code of conduct that you cannot criticize other team members on social media. So when Kevin Kelly saw this Discord comment, he says this is in violation of the code of conduct. Somebody needs to do something about it. And Stephen P. New knows all about this code of conduct because he helped CM Punk when he was being attacked by AEW. And Jericho claimed, I never saw any code of conduct. I never signed anything like that. And then Stephen P. New published it. Like, here it is. Everybody saw it. You definitely should have it too. So he's right about that. You can't disparage these guys in public. It's in AEW's handbook. And they literally have a team that works on this. So that part is at least true. Now, it says AEW began taking adverse actions towards Foot's announcing duties, including Tony Schiavone began doing play-by-play on Collision in November 2023, taking over Foot's role. AEW told Foot that Riccaboni had been disciplined, but would not tell Foot what the discipline was, and that Foot was never told the outcome of the complaint. The lawsuit notes that to date, Foot still does not know. Now, on this subject, I'm not sure if they are at liberty to share that information. They might not have to share what the outcome of the complaint was. If they tell you we acted upon it, which it could have been, hey, don't do this again. And that's all it was. The fine doesn't go in his pocket. They could just say, hey, don't do that again, or please delete that, or please take that down. And that's it. I don't think that they're at liberty to share with him what the outcome of that complaint was. But then again, he might also be at liberty to know. It wouldn't hurt him to know, of course. All right, it says the lawsuit alleges that, quote, the stress from defendant Riccaboni's unwarranted comments and AEW's lack of response adversely affected plaintiff Foot's mental health and his marital status. His wife gonna leave him because he got into an argument with Ian Riccaboni? What? Oh, your wife is going to leave you because she thinks you're in a QAnon cult? What happened to death do us part? It's not till conspiracy theories do us part. What is going on here? Anyway, Foot alleges he informed AEW of, quote, the stress and mental health consequences he was experiencing due to the comment and the lack of response. After he was not booked for Sting's retirement match in March, Foot, quote, called and left a message for AEW's Human Resources Department regarding his treatment. He was terminated in April. Okay. The lawsuit noted, quote, AEW's ratification or adoption is further demonstrated by the adverse decisions made with respect to plaintiff Foot's performance of services for AEW and the eventual termination of the agreement. it can be reasonably inferred from AEW's actions and inactions that it credited the defamatory statements and reinforced the adverse effects of the statements by decreasing Plaintiff Foot's public appearances and terminating the agreement. All right. As a direct and proximate result of the tortious actions and inactions of defendants, Plaintiff Foot suffered damages in the form of loss of business opportunities, damages to his reputation, humiliation, embarrassment, severe emotional distress, lost wages, loss of potential revenue, loss of goodwill, punitive damages, and other damages to be proven at trial. This is incredibly interesting. I think we're about halfway through this thing. This is incredibly interesting, I must say. Now, this next piece is pretty interesting. It says, Foot also alleged that he had a potential, quote, business opportunity to work the May 6th New Japan All Together event, providing English commentary, but believes, quote, based upon information and belief, defendant AEW prevented Plaintiff Foot from being hired to do English commentary. Foot is alleging that he, quote, suffered damages in at least the amount of, and it redacted by the court, and will continue to suffer damages from any future wrongful actions by defendant AEW that interfere with Plaintiff Foot's business opportunities or business relationship. Now, this is legitimate, of course, because if he was fired from AEW and AEW is partners with New Japan, could they lean on New Japan to not use him? Especially since now that he's suing them. That's a legitimate argument that you can make. That since they're business partners, he was blacklisted from New Japan shows, which is a legitimate argument you can make. That's a fair one. The lawsuit notes each plaintiff, quote, suffered damages in the form of loss of business opportunities, damage to their reputation, humiliation, embarrassment, severe emotional distress, loss of wages, loss of potential revenue, loss of earnings, loss of goodwill, punitive damages, and other damages to be proven at trial. The lawsuit is asking the court for the following, quote, declaratory judgment, finding that the arbitration provisions contained in both the talent agreement and the wrestling agreement in section 16.1 of each agreement are unconscionable and unenforceable. So they're trying to get rid of the forced arbitration requirements in their prospective contracts. But why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? You can still get paid if money's what you're after. It says the second point is declaratory judgment finding that the talent and wrestlers are misclassified as independent contractors when they are in fact employees. This is the big one that has a lot of people talking because, again, like I said earlier, Stephen P. New has a real hard-on for this independent contractor status, and he has yet been able to thwart it. And he's going to try to, of course, lean onto WWE through AEW. So now, of course, Endeavor and all of those guys are going to have to pay attention because this also affects UFC. I know a lot of people talk about how it affects WWE. It also will affect UFC. It may affect anybody who uses independent contractors. It also may affect like Uber and Lyft and all of those other industries as well. So pay close attention to that. It says declaratory judgment finding that restrictive covenant provisions contained in both the talent agreement and the wrestler agreement of each agreement are void and unenforceable. Plaintiffs be awarded all appropriate costs, fees, expenses, and pre-judgment and post-judgment interest pursuant to the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as authorized by law on the judgments entered in the plaintiff's behalf. Plaintiffs be awarded injunctive relief to enjoin defendant AEW LLC or All Elite Wrestling LLC and other persons acting in concert or in participation with it from enforcing sections 6.1 and 16.1 of the talent agreement and the wrestling agreement with respect to any talent or wrestler. So, again, without seeing these contracts, they trying to void certain sections of these contracts, which could be very interesting depending on what these are. It says plaintiffs be awarded injunctive relief to enjoin defendant All Elite Wrestling and other persons acting are in concert or participation with it from treating plaintiffs and other putative class members as independent contractors under the talent agreement and the wrestling agreement. They are employees. Plaintiffs have requested a jury trial and have also filed a motion to file under seal, likely for material in their contracts that would not normally fall under public consumption. So that might be why I couldn't find it. The amount of damage they are seeking has been redacted in the filing. AEW and Riccaboni have not yet responded to the lawsuit, and there is nothing in the court indicating that they have been served as of this writing. Okay. So apparently there's a case management meeting set for November 15th at 11:30 a.m. Now, AEW has since responded and said they do not intend to comment on ongoing litigations. So that is their comments, essentially. And Stephen P. New, he came out and made some comments. So let's talk about that for a second. So Stephen P. New made some comments to Sports Illustrated by saying, "I am proud to represent Kevin Kelly and the Tate Twins in this lawsuit. I am looking forward to having their day in court and the truth coming out about their situations. Finally, I hope this lawsuit is the genesis of a change in the professional wrestling industry wherein we can make pro wrestlers the employees they are instead of independent contractors, which they are not and never have been." Let's pause right here, because the overall idea of this thing, the reason that they're suing, is not because they were harmed by being independent contractors. It is that they were harmed by being fired from AEW for defamation and other kinds of issues. They just kind of threw this whole independent contractor thing in there to make you believe that this was what it's all about. It seems to me that this is a Trojan horse situation where they're going to argue defamation and humiliation and all this kind of stuff as a mode of getting their foot in the door so they can argue about independent contractor status, which is activist stuff, and it's one of those things that I really don't respect. It's like, you could have just sued and say that we're independent contractors and we're not, we are devoid of X, Y, and Z, because if you're an independent contractor and you're misclassified, there's damages that comes with being misclassified. There are certain taxes that need to be paid. There are certain other benefits that you should have as an employee. There's other kinds of risk that AEW has to take if you are an employee. That's a completely different situation that we should be talking about here. To me, it seems drastically unfair that you would not mention that the Tate Twins or that Kevin Kelly, if he's an independent contractor, which he very well may be, that they didn't suffer any harm by being independent contractors. That should be, if you're going to argue misclassification, why aren't you talking about how the misclassification has harmed you? That would be the purpose of suing for being misclassified, is that you can discuss how you were harmed by the misclassification. But they haven't done that. I don't understand it. So, that was one of Stephen P. New's comments. He also commented on Twitter. So on Twitter, when it was announced by the Wrestling News, it says, "How fitting and appropriate that on Labor Day weekend, a lawsuit is filed seeking to correct, among other things, the abhorrent practice of misclassification of pro wrestlers as independent contractors and not employees. All AEW wrestlers are now members of this putative class." Of course, he was questioned about WWE. Why aren't you going after WWE? And we're going to address all of that stuff in a second. Steve New said, quote, "Soon as we have plaintiffs who will want to sue WWE for the misclassification, we will. Hopefully this litigation inspires someone to step up." And that is the reason why they're doing all this stuff. They're always trying to get more business. I mean, ultimately, it's all about self-interest. So they always want to get more business. Now, clearly, I think everybody knows this is all just settlement bait. He's just going to get some money and go away. It's not worth going to court over. If you're Tony Khan, this is a waste of time. This is not worth going to court over. Now, here's the issue. People will think that by paying a settlement, that would end everything. Well, they could actually ask as a condition of the settlement that AEW convert everybody to employees rather than being independent contractors. They could do that if they wanted to, but I don't think that'll be a condition of the settlement. It almost never is. But this is an interesting thing because, of course, everybody wants to target WWE. But this rule, if it was to go through to court and then they were to win, and I'm talking about the Tate Twins and Stephen P. New and all these guys, if they were to win, it would affect WWE anyway. So, and I'm pretty sure AEW's contracts are looser and less restrictive than WWE's contracts, which is what everybody is saying. That's one of the biggest arguments you see online, is that AEW's contracts are less restrictive than WWE's in terms of allowing their talent to work third parties, independents, and do a lot of other things. So my thing is the company will be more protective of these employees. If they were employees, they would be more protective of them, and there would be fewer. I mean, I don't know. You have to look in life. There is no answers to questions. There are only trade-offs. Okay. So if you decide, let's say they win and all of the wrestlers are all of a sudden employees. Now that's just part one. Part two will be to push for them to become unionized. Well, you can't have, as a wrestling company, all these people be converted into employees. Your costs are going to skyrocket. And then if they turn around and unionize, your costs are going to skyrocket even more. You're going to put a lot of companies out of business, except for some of these fly-by-night promotions that barely operate. Those will be fine. But like your MLWs, your NWAs, who have, some people have exclusive contracts in NWA. You know, TNA, where some people have exclusive contracts. You're going to destroy some of these companies. Once these wrestlers, if they were to win and they were converted to employees, all of a sudden the company is now responsible for payroll taxes, which they've never been responsible for before. So now every employee is another tax that you have to pay. You're going to cut your employees because you want to pay fewer taxes. So everybody who's trying to be a yay, I'm a do-gooder, yay, you're going to end up shrinking the business. It's better for the business that wrestlers are independent contractors. Oh, well, if they unionize, so then what? It'll be even fewer of them then. You're going to shrink the business down to the point where there's only going to be WWE and maybe a severely hobbled AEW. Because these companies still require the talent to make money, which means you still have to sell out buildings and sell pay-per-views, etc. And these all this money that is going to cost the company, somebody's going to have to pay it. And I can tell you, if you upset about a $50 pay-per-view for AEW, wait until it's $65 because they have to pay payroll taxes and all that kind of shit, right? They're just going to pass the cost on to you, the consumer. That's what they do. That's how business works. The companies, they pay it out of pocket, but they get money from somewhere, and they're going to get money from you. Or they're going to pass the tax on to their corporate partners. So it's going to come out of their pocket. You know, their sponsors and Netflix and Warner Bros. Discovery and Access and Anthem and all whoever they get money from. That's where the money's going to have to come from to pay the payroll taxes. All these do-gooders and all of their opinions about how things should be are completely and totally misguided. They're all misguided. Now, we'll talk about that some other time, as I don't think it's going to get that far. Since this issue broke, there were some comments made by Jim Ross, who called the lawsuit frivolous. Some people got very upset about JR saying this. So this is from TJR Wrestling, which is transcribing Jim Ross's comments. Jim Ross says, quote, "When you sign your contract, you agree to the terms. That would include being an independent contractor. I'll say this, the plaintiffs, Kevin Kelly and those guys, they'll run out of money before Tony Khan does. I don't hold out much hope they're going to get any kind of settlement whatsoever. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a judge or a lawyer or anything along those lines. I don't like those kinds of lawsuits. I think they're frivolous. You would think guys would get together and work out something before they go to spend their money on a lawyer, who is probably doing it. If you win, you get this. If you don't win, no harm, no foul. There is harm and there is foul. You knew what you were doing when you signed your deal. I'm not familiar with the two wrestlers. I know who they are. Kevin Kelly is an old friend of mine for years. I was sad to see him leave the way he did. He was just unhappy. He wasn't happy. I think he wanted a bigger role, and that suddenly wasn't available to him. Then all of a sudden, he's gone. It's unfortunate. It's sad. He had a lot to offer. As far as the independent contractor thing being thrown out and overruled, I don't hold any hope for that to happen. Well, JR, I'm with you on that. I don't expect much of anything, but I do expect a settlement. They probably already working on a settlement right now. Again, this is part of trying to get more money. I've told you guys, every time you go through a lawsuit, you find some of the most salacious stuff in these lawsuits. Because the point is, you don't want to go to court, crack open your books, go through discovery, all this kind of stuff. Your attorneys are very expensive. Our attorneys are working mostly pro bono because they're doing it for the love. And let's see how we can siphon some money out of AEW. It's a big company. Tony Khan's a billionaire. He's got the best lawyers. Everything will be fine. They're probably already working out what the hell the Tate Twins want. What do you want? What do you want in terms of money? All right, what do you want in terms of money, Kevin Kelly? Kevin Kelly claims that they offered him a severance package. It actually hit the internet on August the 30th, which is the same day the lawsuit dropped, even though we didn't find out about it until September the 4th. The lawsuit, from some screenshots that I saw, it was actually filed on August the 30th. So the same day he apparently did this interview. So Kevin Kelly talked about, he was talking to Brian Hebner and Jimmy Corderas, saying they fired me and it was just real shitty and picky. They gave me what do you call it? This little severance package, very little. Then they took it back. They put it into my account, and then a couple of days later they took it back because I didn't sign some form or something like that. And then he said it'll all come to light eventually. So he was offered a severance package, and he didn't sign what was likely an NDA or some other kind of form, and so they took his severance away, which is ridiculous. So before we wrap up, we got to talk about this, and I purposefully waited until the end to discuss this because it's pretty much just everybody's opinion. The AEW conspiracy theorists think that Stephen P. New's involvement with this lawsuit is directly related to Jim Cornette and his dislike of AEW. And that, the news outlet which exposed this story, which is Brian Last, the Wrestling News, which of course is connected to Jim Cornette, therefore also Stephen P. New, is they're playing some kind of inside baseball to destroy AEW. The likelihood of this is minimal. Now, the argument that it is some kind of vendetta is that Jim Cornette rails on AEW pretty much every week, and Brian Last is right there with him, and they promote Stephen P. New, and Stephen P. New likely gave this information to Brian Last for him to expose to the wrestling world that AEW was being sued. But here's the thing, when it comes to professional wrestling, all right, Stephen P. New is probably the most famous attorney outside of WWE's longtime attorney, right? So whenever wrestlers are in a jam, calling Stephen P. New is kind of what they do. Stephen P. New, of course, helped with the Yeet issue when it comes to WWE with Jey Uso and that indie wrestler that owned Yeet before Jey Uso could go full born with it. They had to work out some kind of situation, some kind of settlement. So Stephen P. New is like always the liaison between wrestlers and the law. It's a recurring thing. So I'm not surprised at all that if there's doing some kind of independent contractor challenge, that Stephen P. New is involved with that. He seems like the kind of attorney that all wrestlers will lean to if they need help with something, because they've heard his name a lot. And if you listen to Jim Cornette or whatever, you've heard his name, and he knows a lot about wrestling, and he understands the business a little bit, and he understands the law a little bit. And so he's trying to find that intersection of wrestling and the law where he can discuss certain legal situations like the independent contractor status. I think that's more the issue than there being some kind of steadfast conspiracy to take down AEW. I don't believe that for a second, because there will be other things to take down AEW for, rather than independent contractors and them firing the Tate Twins and Kevin Kelly. I doubt it. There's a bunch of other things, if he really wanted to try to sink AEW, that he probably could look into. But as an attorney, he can only work with the people who are willing to work with him, which means that the people will have to contact him, which means likely Kevin Kelly and the Tate Twins contacted him in order to launch this lawsuit. And Kevin Kelly, of course, was talking about the lawsuit months ago, that he was going to sue AEW. And I'm pretty sure they just recruited the Tate Twins, who are equally mad. So I don't think it's one big conspiracy as much as the AEW fans want it to be. Now, the AEW fans are being very hypocritical. They think that AEW having independent contractors is good, while WWE having independent contractors is bad. And it's all about, restrictions and those sorts of things. Okay, we could debate that. But ultimately, it's not a conspiracy. At least not in my eyes. I don't think it's one big conspiracy to hurt AEW or to halt them. I think Stephen P. New is mostly driven by his misguided idea that he's going to help the wrestling business and he's going to help wrestlers by destroying the classification of independent contractor status. And many people have tried, including Stephen P. New, and none of them have succeeded thus far. But they're going to keep shooting their shot until they finally hit it. So it is what it is, but it's mostly just embittered employees, being the Tate Twins and Kevin Kelly. These guys are likely unemployable because if they can't work for AEW, they're not likely to go to work for WWE. And, their careers are pretty much over. So they might as well go ahead and nuke from orbit AEW, which was the exact same thing that happened with Ring of Honor and with Kelly Klein. She pretty much, she went to Newsweek, exposed all the business of Ring of Honor and unsafe working conditions and sexual harassment and all this kind of stuff. She ended up getting fired, and then she sued them because she couldn't go work anywhere else. At that point, she had already killed her career. So she might as well go ahead and get one last paycheck out of it in the form of a lawsuit, which she probably ultimately got. I wouldn't put it past at all for her to have actually got a settlement out of this deal before the company was sold. So, this is the kind of thing that's right up a Stephen P. New's alley. He's seen as the wrestling lawyer. He's seen like the guy who understands the business and, pro wrestling. And the other guy, Benjamin Bayer, he's an injury attorney, from my understanding. He's a local Pennsylvania injury attorney. So Stephen P. New is likely just the guy who is there because wrestlers know him and wrestling fans know him. But Benjamin Bayer is the guy who practices law professionally in Pennsylvania. Now, Stephen P. New might actually be licensed in Pennsylvania. I don't know. But I know he's not originally from Pennsylvania. I think he's from Tennessee, or Kentucky, one of those states. So he likely was called in because it's a wrestling matter, So here it is. I don't think it's one big conspiracy. The AEW fans are trying to cope their way through this thing. But lawsuits happen. People get mad because they got fired and they say stuff. They say that they were sexually harassed. They say that they face sexism and racism and all this stuff. So it has to be worked out in court. I mean, that's the only way you can handle it at this point. Do I expect this thing to go to trial for 2 or 3 years on this issue? No, it's not worth it. It's not worth the money, So I expect there to be some kind of settlement, and then that is that, and that'll be the end of it. But we will stay here and follow it along for our entertainment and yours. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort